Handcuffed on my own ranch while HOA Karen Vivian Wells screamed about vagrant camping laws. She didn't know I'm the county sheriff. Picture this. I'm fishing at my family's lake, cattle lowing nearby, when flashlights blind me. My deputy cuffs me, apologizing, because Vivian in her white Lexus called me a vagrant, filming with a smug smirk. Her taunt? Rules apply to everyone. Rage burned in me. I'm Sheriff Rex Calloway, 8 years strong. Her harassment's now evidence in a federal fraud case. Small towns spill secrets, and Vivian's are ugly. Today, badge gleaming, I'm slapping cuffs on the real criminal. Got an HOA horror story? Drop your wildest Karen clash below. Where are you watching from? Bet your HOA Karen never went this far. Let me back up and tell you how this whole mess started. I inherited this 47-acre ranch from my grandfather, Bull Calloway, a man who could stare down a tornado and make it change direction. This land's been in our family since 1952, back when handshake deals meant something and neighbors helped neighbors without asking what's in it for them. The crown jewel? A spring-fed lake so clear you can count pebbles 15 feet down. The smell of mesquite smoke from evening campfires mixed with that clean lake smell always reset my head after a hard week. Been county sheriff 8 years now. Domestic violence calls, meth labs, accident scenes that stick to your soul like tar. By Friday evening, I'm running on fumes and bad coffee. That lake's my therapy. Pitch a tent, catch some bass, listen to nothing but water lapping against the shore and cattle settling in for the night. Recent divorce didn't help my stress levels, nothing dramatic. Sarah and I just grew apart like trees planted too close together. She kept the house in town with its manicured lawn and homeowner association rules. I got my sanctuary back. Fair trade. Then Hurricane Vivian blew in from California. Vivian Thornberry Wells, 58 years old, arrived 2 years ago in her pristine white Lexus SUV. You know the type. Blessed license plate frame, perfectly styled blonde hair that doesn't move in wind, and an attitude that could freeze hell over. She bought the biggest house in Meadowbrook Estates, the new development that sprouted up like poison ivy along my eastern property line. Within 6 months, she'd elbowed her way into being HOA president. Her campaign promise? Bringing proper standards to this community. The artificial vanilla scent of her car air freshener still makes my stomach turn. I've got nothing against folks wanting nice neighborhoods, but Vivian imported that militant California HOA mentality to rural Texas, where people had been getting along just fine for generations, without somebody measuring grass height with a ruler. Our first meeting happened on a Tuesday evening. I'm unloading fishing gear when I hear gravel crunching under expensive tires. Vivian emerges flanked by her loyal minions, Pudge Morrison, a retired insurance adjuster with dead eyes and too much time, and Delilah Kranz, former city planning clerk who got forced out for being too nitpicky even for government work. Sheriff Calloway, Vivian announced in that honey-dripped voice that immediately set my teeth on edge. We need to discuss your recreational activities. She handed me an official violation notice zip-tied to a clipboard like she was serving a federal warrant. The charges? Unsightly temporary structures and non-conforming recreational activities affecting community standards. $500 fine. 7-day compliance deadline. The sound of that crisp violation paper fluttering in the evening breeze still makes my jaw clench. Ma'am, I said, keeping my voice level, this property predates your HOA by 40 years. I've got the original surveys to prove it. Her smile never wavered, the kind of smile sharks give seals. Paperwork can be complicated, Sheriff. Rules are rules. This isn't the Wild West anymore. Delilah stepped forward, clipboard clutched like a weapon. Wouldn't want any complaints about law enforcement professionalism reaching the county commissioners. The threat hung in the air like smoke from a house fire. Crystal clear. Play ball or they'd torpedo my career. I've arrested tweakers with better people skills than these three. Ladies, I said, tipping my hat with exaggerated politeness, I'll certainly look into this matter. Y'all have a blessed evening. Driving home, I stopped for gas station coffee that tasted like burnt disappointment and wondered what fresh hell I'd stumbled into. Turns out, I had no clue how deep this rabbit hole went. But Bull Calloway didn't raise a quitter, and these ladies were about to learn that some fights choose you whether you want them or not. Within a week, Vivian kicked her campaign into high gear like a woman possessed. I came home from a 3-day camping trip to find she'd been busy as a tick on a hound dog. My phone was blowing up. County Planning Office, Environmental Agency, even the State Water Commission. Seems someone filed formal complaints about potential water contamination and wildlife habitat disruption at my property. The metallic taste of anger mixed with morning coffee when I realized the scope of her assault. Deputy Martinez pulled me aside at the courthouse. "Sheriff, you need to see this." He showed me surveillance photos of Vivian positioned on the roadside with a telephoto lens, documenting my property like she was gathering evidence for a murder trial. But that wasn't the worst part. Turns out she'd hired a paralegal and joined Facebook groups, Rural Property Rights Warriors and HOA Legal Victory Stories. Her post painted me as a stubborn local sheriff who thinks his badge puts him above community standards. 847 comments of anti-law enforcement garbage that would make your grandmother reach for the soap. One post stopped me cold. Sometimes you have to make examples of people who think they're untouchable. Badges don't make you special. This sheriff is about to learn that lesson the hard way. That crossed a line. Time for my counterpunch. I spent the next morning in the county archives, digging through dusty boxes that smelled like old leather and forgotten promises. Years of sheriff work taught me that paper trails don't lie, and everybody's got secrets if you know where to look. The satisfying sound of old survey maps unfolding across my kitchen table like battle plans. What I found made me grin like a possum eating persimmons. Princess Vivian's perfect development had some dirty laundry. When Meadowbrook Estates got built, 3 houses, including hers, violated creek setback requirements by 15 to 20 feet. They were sitting in flood easement territory, which is about as legal as a $3 bill. The best part? They knew. Internal documents showed the developer greased the palm of a county planning clerk who got fired 18 months later for corruption. I remember that scandal. Guy took bribes to rubber stamp permits. Back then, I thought about property owners getting screwed. Now I realized Vivian was one of the screwers, not the screwies. My grandfather always said you gotta let folks dig their own holes. So I decided to fight this as a private citizen, not as sheriff. No badge, no authority. Just one Texan standing up to a California transplant with delusions of grandeur. The whole mess became prime entertainment at Marlene's Diner. Small towns love drama, especially when it involves somebody getting too big for their britches. The comforting smell of chicken fried steak and diesel exhaust as the evening crowd rolled in with their opinions. That HOA Lady versus Rex dominated every conversation. Town split predictably. Newcomers talked about property standards, while old-timers muttered about outsiders telling folks what to do. Marlene started an unofficial betting pool. Current odds favored me, but Vivian had deep pockets and California crazy on her side. Gus from the hardware store mentioned she'd tried citing him for parking his work truck in his own driveway. Commercial vehicle violation, she called it. 3 other locals shared similar harassment stories. Pattern emerging. She targeted working folks while leaving wealthy neighbors alone. That's when I remembered something from Police Academy about property law. Texas has strong adverse possession protections. You can't just form an HOA around existing property and claim authority over it. Original property rights trump new community agreements every single time. Wish I'd paid more attention back then instead of thinking about fishing. 3 days later, Vivian proved she wasn't backing down. Her latest Nextdoor post read, "Does anyone know if camping counts as livestock? Asking for a friend?" I had to laugh. Woman was dumber than a box of rocks, but persistent as a hungry mosquito. My phone buzzed with a text from Martinez. "Boss, you might want to brace yourself. Word is she's planning something big for next week." Little did I know just how big. Vivian's something big turned out to be a surveillance operation that would make the NSA proud. She organized what she called a Property Standards Committee, basically her personal spy network. 5 Meadowbrook residents got patrol schedules, assigned shifts, and clipboards for documenting my every move like I was running a criminal enterprise instead of enjoying my God-given right to fish on my own land. The unsettling feeling of being watched every time I stepped outside my front door. Ring cameras sprouted overnight like digital mushrooms, strategically positioned on their properties but aimed straight at mine. Technically legal since they were on their own lots, but creepy as a stalker's photo album. Every time I fired up my truck or grabbed the mail, motion alerts probably lit up their phones. Then my own department started getting swamped with calls. 23 reports in 8 days from the same number. Suspicious camping activity, possible vagrant encampment, ongoing trespassing situation. Deputy Martinez, rookie that he is, didn't know it was my property and actually drove patrol checks twice. The irony tasted more bitter than gas station coffee at 3 a.m. Vivian was building a paper trail thicker than a phone book, setting up her public nuisance case. Had to admit, her tactical thinking was solid even if I wanted to arrest her for breathing. But I didn't get to be sheriff by being stupid. Years of law enforcement taught me that people's pasts predict their futures. So I did what any good cop does. Ran Vivian Thornberry Wells through every database I could legally access. What popped up made my jaw drop. 3 previous addresses across California and Arizona. 3 separate HOA disputes. Same exact playbook every single time. Move in, seize control of the board, systematically harass problem neighbors until they sell cheap, then mysteriously those properties get flipped for huge profits. The sound of evidence printing at 2 a.m. in my office told an ugly story. Bakersfield, forced out elderly couple after citing them for excessive religious decorations. Phoenix, drove away single mom with disabled kid through constant noise violations. Each time, properties sold for 20 to 30% below market value to community-minded buyers who just happened to be Vivian's associates. The Phoenix case went to court. Lawsuit filed, settled privately, records sealed tighter than Fort Knox. But sealed doesn't mean invisible when you've got badge access. That's when it clicked like a shotgun shell chambering. This wasn't about my camping or community standards. This was about cold, hard cash. Vivian wasn't just a control freak. She was running a real estate scam with an HOA uniform. I needed perspective, so I drove to Marlene's diner where all the town's wisdom gets served with coffee and pie. "Gus," I said, sliding into the corner booth, "tell me more about those other folks Vivian's been hassling." The smell of bacon grease and honest conversation filled the air as Gus laid out the pattern. Elderly widow whose husband just passed, sudden violation notices about unmaintained landscaping. Young mechanic restoring a classic Camaro, cited for commercial activity in residential zone. Vietnam vet growing vegetables for therapy, agricultural use violations. All got the same treatment. Daily documentation, legal threats, then helpful offers to relocate somewhere more suitable to their lifestyle. "She's picking off the vulnerable ones," Gus said, stirring sugar into coffee black as crude oil. "Folks who can't afford lawyers or don't know their rights." That's when Dr. Reginald Thornberry shuffled over, looking like a man who'd lost a fight with his own conscience. "Sheriff," he whispered, glancing around like his wife might materialize from thin air. "I need to apologize for Vivian's behavior. She's done this at every place we've lived. I thought retirement might calm her down, but money just makes her hungrier." He slipped me a business card for a divorce attorney. Really good lawyer, helped me understand my legal options regarding marital asset separation. Even her own husband was planning his escape route. Walking back to my truck, I texted my old training partner at the state police. "Remember when drunk teenagers were our biggest headache?" "Why? What fresh hell you dealing with now? HOA president running a real estate scam disguised as community improvement? Need backup?" "Not yet, but this is going to get interesting real quick." Storm clouds were building on the horizon, and Vivian Thornberry Wells had no idea she was about to get hit by a Texas-sized reality check. 3 days later, Vivian proved she had nerves of steel and the common sense of a brick. She discovered I was the sheriff through her spy network, probably Googled my name after someone recognized me at the courthouse. Any reasonable person would have backed down and apologized. Not Vivian. She doubled down like a poker player with a losing hand. "No one is above the law," became her new rallying cry, posted on every social media platform from here to California. But here's where she really stepped in it. She contacted county commissioners directly, demanding I recuse myself from any HOA-related calls, then threatened to involve the state attorney general over conflict of interest and abuse of public office. The bitter taste of stress and too much coffee started becoming my daily breakfast routine. Tuesday morning brought a formal written complaint from the county administrator. Had to meet with commissioners next week to address citizen concerns about impartial law enforcement. Vivian had submitted photos of me camping, claiming I used county vehicles for personal recreation. Complete fabrication, but politics is about perception, not truth. That's when she made her fatal error. The photos she submitted as evidence contained timestamp data proving they were shot from my property, not the public road. Her surveillance committee had been trespassing for weeks, documenting my private life like some twisted reality show. Game on. I started wearing a body camera during all property visits. Learned that from domestic cases where everybody's story changes. Installed trail cameras strategically positioned on my land, aimed at roads and fence lines. Within 48 hours, I struck gold. The satisfying sound of digital cameras clicking as they captured Pudge Morrison, testing my gate lock at 2 a.m. like some wannabe burglar. Then Sarah called completely out of the blue. My ex-wife still had that shark instinct for legal blood in the water. "Rex," she said, "I've been watching this Facebook drama, and that woman reminds me exactly why I escaped California." "How so?" "HOA intimidation tactics. I worked for a law firm handling these cases. Mind if I dig around?" Sarah had resources I didn't. access to civil court databases, property records, legal filings across multiple states. 2 days later, she uncovered the smoking gun. The rustle of legal documents spread across my kitchen table like a treasure map to justice. Rex, look at this. Vivian's brother-in-law owns the mortgage company financing every single distressed property purchase in her previous neighborhoods. Same pattern: harassment campaign, lowball offer, quick sale, family financing, flip for double profit within 6 months. That's when I remembered something from a federal law enforcement seminar about organized crime. When criminal enterprises cross state lines and involve multiple conspirators, federal racketeering statutes start applying. Suddenly, this wasn't just local harassment, it was potentially a federal case. This isn't just about being mean to neighbors, Sarah continued. This is systematic fraud disguised as community improvement. Meanwhile, our little dispute was dividing the county like a Civil War battle line. Local newspaper headline read, "Sheriff versus HOA. Rural rights dispute sparks heated debate." Comments section exploded with over 200 responses arguing everything from property rights to law enforcement accountability. The familiar smell of newsprint and courthouse coffee as reporters started circling like vultures sensing fresh carrion. Support split predictably, old-timers backing me, newcomers supporting proper oversight. But something beautiful emerged. Other victims found their voices. Mrs. Aria, the elderly widow, finally spoke up about Vivian's pressure campaign over property maintenance violations since her husband's death. Young mechanic with the classic car project shared his harassment story. Vietnam veteran growing therapy vegetables described constant citations for agricultural violations. Pattern was crystal clear: target vulnerable residents, force cheap sales, profit from community destruction. VFW offered legal fund support. Ranchers Association provided character references. Even some Meadowbrooks residents quietly expressed solidarity, tired of living under Vivian's dictatorship. But our queen wasn't finished escalating. She called an emergency HOA meeting to vote on no confidence in local law enforcement. Her solution? Hire private security to patrol Meadowbrook because current sheriff's department is compromised by personal interests. The metallic taste of pure outrage as I realized she wanted her own private militia. That evening, I reviewed property law from my academy days. Texas strongly protects landowner rights. You can't just declare authority over existing properties through surveying and intimidation. Professional surveyors carry legal weight that HOA complaints and smartphone apps never will. My phone buzzed. Martinez texting, "Boss, she just posted about hiring security consultants for uncooperative residents. Getting seriously weird vibes." I texted back, "Screenshot everything. Document all posts. This is evidence now." Vivian Thornberry Wells was about to learn that some fights you just can't win. Sarah's breakthrough came at 11:47 p.m. on a Thursday, delivered through a phone call that changed everything. "Rex, get over here now. I found the smoking gun, and it's bigger than we thought." 20 minutes later, I was sitting in her kitchen staring at documents that made my stomach drop. Sarah had called in favors from her old law firm, the one that handled Vivian's sealed Phoenix case. Remember that settlement? Well, sealed doesn't mean invisible when you know the right clerks. The smell of late-night coffee mixing with the rustle of damning evidence spread across her kitchen table. The original Meadowbrook Estates development permit required a 50-foot buffer zone from all existing properties. Vivian's house and 4 others violated that requirement by 15 to 30 feet. But here's what made my blood boil. They knew about it from day one. "Look at these internal emails," Sarah said, pointing to printed communications. "Vivian to developer, buffer zone issue resolved through legal channels. Code for, they bought off the planning clerk." The bitter taste of corruption left my mouth dry as desert sand. But that was just the beginning. The real bombshell made me want to start making arrests immediately. "The bribe was temporary," Sarah continued, "designed to get construction approved until statute of limitations expired. Problem? They miscalculated Texas law. Buffer violations can be challenged for 10 years, not 7. So if anyone orders a new survey, 5 houses get demolition orders, property values crash, and since Vivian concealed known violations when she bought, she's facing federal fraud charges. That's when her real motivation crystallized like ice forming on a windshield. If my property ever got developed or surveyed, it would automatically expose the violations. Vivian needed my land either empty or under HOA control to prevent that discovery. Her harassment wasn't about camping. It was about preventing a property survey that would destroy her criminal enterprise. "She's perfected this scam," Sarah said, pulling up records from California and Arizona. identify properties that could trigger regulatory problems, harass owners into panic sales, buy through shell companies, then eliminate the threat through control or development. The sound of my grandfather's voice echoing in memory. Some folks will steal your land with a pen instead of a gun. The Arizona couple's story finally made sense. Their property bordered a development with zoning violations. Vivian harassed them for 2 years over fabricated violations, bought their land for 60 cents on the dollar, then immediately had it rezoned to protect her investment. Rex, this isn't harassment. This is systematic theft using HOA authority as legal cover. Sarah spread out financial documents showing connections between Vivian and every community buyer who purchased harassed neighbors' properties, shell companies, family trusts, business partnerships. All roads led back to the Thornberry Wells crime family. She's not working alone. Brother-in-law handles financing. Cousin manages flips. Husband's medical practice provides startup capital. It's a full family operation. The weight of badges and oaths suddenly felt heavier on my chest. Conservative estimate, $2 million in profits across 5 years in 3 states. That's just what I can document. My phone buzzed. Martinez texting, "Sheriff, latest HOA minutes show they voted to start acquisition discussions with Mrs. Aria and 2 other elderly residents." Vivian was accelerating her timeline, grabbing vulnerable properties before I could expose her operation. "Sarah, how fast can you compile federal evidence?" 48 hours. "But you need to decide, handle this as victim Rex Calloway or Sheriff Rex Calloway?" The ethical dilemma hit like a truck. Using official authority for personal disputes violated everything I swore to uphold. But exposing organized crime was exactly why voters elected me sheriff. "Both," I said finally. "Fight harassment as property owner Rex. Expose fraud as Sheriff Calloway, protector of this county." Sarah grinned like a prosecutor who'd just cracked the case of her career. "Now you're thinking strategically." Vivian thought she was bullying a stubborn camper. She had no idea she'd just declared war on organized crime's worst nightmare. A pissed-off sheriff with a personal stake in justice. Time to show her what Texas justice really looks like. By Friday morning, I had my war council assembled at Marlene's diner like the Texas version of the Avengers. Sarah arrived first, briefcase loaded with legal firepower and that shark smile she gets when smelling blood in courtroom water. Deputy Martinez rolled up in civilian clothes, laptop bag over his shoulder, looking more like a college kid than the tech wizard about to destroy a criminal empire. The familiar comfort of bacon grease and honest coffee filled our corner booth as we spread out for battle planning. Gus locked the hardware store early to join us, bringing 30 years of local intelligence and a serious grudge against outsiders telling Texans how to live. Marlene herself pulled up a chair, notepad ready. That woman collected secrets like other folks collected stamps, and wasn't shy about using them for righteous causes. Last through the door was retired Sheriff Kowalski, my old mentor who'd forgotten more about corruption cases than most prosecutors ever learn. White-haired, eagle-eyed, and meaner than a stepped-on rattler when criminals hid behind badges or authority. "All right, troops," I said, laying Sarah's evidence across the table like military maps. "Here's the war we're fighting." Our strategy fell into place like dominoes finding their perfect pattern. Sarah would handle financial investigation, tracing every dirty dollar through Vivian's network of shell companies and property flips. Her paralegal background and legal connections meant accessing records that would take official channels weeks to subpoena. The satisfying click of calculator keys as she ran numbers on HOA fund theft that made my jaw drop. "Rex, they've stolen $47,000 from their own community members," she announced. "Used HOA dues to pay for harassment campaigns, private investigators, even that paralegal research. It's like charging victims for their own torture." Martinez would coordinate digital evidence collection, creating an airtight case file that federal prosecutors would drool over. Screenshots, surveillance footage, phone records, everything documented with timestamps and legal annotations. "I've been tracking their online patterns," he said, fingers flying across keyboard keys. "They coordinate harassment through private Facebook groups, share strategies for targeting problem residents, even celebrate successful property acquisitions like some kind of sick game." Community intelligence fell to Gus and Marlene, who between them knew every family secret and financial struggle in the county. They'd identify other victims, document harassment patterns, and organize neighborhood support for our public confrontation. "Mrs. Aria isn't their only target," Marlene revealed, consulting her handwritten notes. "They've got lists, elderly folks, single parents, anyone they think can't fight back. Makes my blood boil." The scratch of pencils on legal pads documenting decades of local wisdom. Kowalski would provide strategic guidance, drawing on his experience with corruption cases that actually stuck in court. His knowledge of county politics and judicial attitudes was pure gold. He knew which judges would be sympathetic and which prosecutors had backbone for taking on organized crime. "Here's what you need to understand about property fraud," he said, stirring sugar into coffee black as crude oil. "It's not about the money, it's about power. These people get off on destroying lives, and they're usually too arrogant to cover their tracks properly." That's when Sarah dropped her biggest bombshell yet. "I found their training materials," she said, pulling out printed emails. Vivian's been sharing best practices with HOA presidents in other states. They've got playbooks for targeting vulnerable residents, step-by-step guides for creating legal harassment, even template letters for lowball purchase offers. The metallic taste of pure rage as I realized this wasn't just local crime. It was a franchise operation. Years of police work taught me that criminals love patterns, and Sarah had found theirs. She explained how county clerk records reveal everything. Property title research shows ownership history, transfer patterns, even suspicious timing that screams fraud. Every transaction leaves breadcrumbs that investigators can follow backward through shell companies to find the real money. Better yet, Martinez added, open records laws mean government communications are public. I can request every email between HOA representatives and county officials, looking for coordination or selective enforcement patterns. The legal angle was bulletproof. When harassment becomes part of systematic property acquisition across state lines, federal racketeering statutes start applying. RICO cases carry serious prison time and asset forfeiture, the kind of penalties that make white-collar criminals wet themselves. The sound of justice gears grinding into motion echoed in my ears like beautiful music. Our timeline was aggressive, but doable. Sarah needed 48 hours for financial analysis. Martinez would have digital evidence compiled by Sunday. Gus and Marlene would rally community support for Monday's showdown with county commissioners. "What happens when Vivian realizes we're onto her?" I asked. "Desperate people do desperate things," Kowalski observed. "Our job is being ready when she makes her final mistake." As if summoned by our conversation, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. "Sheriff Calloway, some accidents happen to people who don't know when to quit. Friendly advice." I showed the message to our counsel. Sarah's grin could have powered the courthouse. "Congratulations, Rex." She just handed us evidence of criminal threats against a law enforcement officer. The trap was baited and set. Now we just had to wait for Vivian Thornberry Wells to hang herself with her own rope. Monday morning brought proof that Vivian had officially crossed the line from annoying to dangerous. Martinez called at 6 a.m., voice tight with concern. "Sheriff, someone hit your property hard overnight. 4 tires, gate lock superglued shut, and they left you a present on the front porch." The bitter taste of morning coffee mixed with pure rage as I surveyed the damage to my truck. The present was a dead possum with a note pinned to its fur. "Last warning, smart people know when to quit." Classy, real classy. But vandalism was just the opening act. Turns out Vivian had discovered our investigation through her courthouse spy network. Probably that brown-nosing clerk who'd sell his grandmother's secrets for a $5 tip. Instead of cutting her losses like any rational criminal, she escalated with the strategic brilliance of a cornered wildcat. The ominous sound of unfamiliar engines cruising past my property at all hours, day and night. She'd hired what she called a security consultant, ex-Houston cop named Burke who got bounced for excessive force complaints. Guy looked like a steroid advertisement gone wrong, driving around in a black pickup with windows darker than his soul. But Vivian's real genius move was targeting my badge directly. Anonymous complaints started flooding state police internal affairs faster than rain in a Texas thunderstorm. Sheriff uses department resources for personal vendettas, unprofessional conduct in property disputes, conflicts of interest compromising law enforcement. Each complaint was crafted just truthful enough to require investigation. Nothing provable, but sufficient to drown me in bureaucratic quicksand while she grabbed more vulnerable properties. The metallic taste of helpless frustration as I realized she was trying to suspend me before our public showdown. That's when Burke made the mistake that sealed his fate. Saturday evening, I'm grilling burgers when this walking muscle farm strolls onto my property like he owned the deed, bold as a brass monkey, grinning like he'd already won. "Sheriff Calloway," he said in that fake friendly tone bad cops use before things go sideways. "Mrs. Thornberry Wells wants to make you an offer." I kept flipping meat, letting him hang himself with his own rope. "I'm all ears. 50,000 cash. You relocate somewhere more compatible with your situation. Everyone walks away satisfied." When I didn't jump at his generous proposal, his demeanor shifted darker than storm clouds. Course, accidents happen to stubborn folks who don't recognize good advice when they hear it. What Burke didn't know was that FBI agent Patterson had already contacted me about their multi-state investigation. They'd been tracking property fraud patterns across Nevada, Oregon, and Arizona that matched our situation exactly. My body camera wasn't just recording threats, it was gathering federal evidence. The satisfying knowledge that every word was being documented for prosecutors who specialized in interstate crime. But I wasn't just sitting around collecting threats like some passive victim. While Vivian hired muscle and filed complaints, my team was building a prosecution case that would make federal attorneys weep with joy. Sarah had compiled financial evidence showing systematic money laundering through property flips, HOA fund theft totaling over $60,000, and shell company networks designed to hide criminal profits. Martinez traced their digital conspiracy through social media coordination, encrypted communications, and shared strategy documents. These amateurs had been operating so openly they practically begged for federal attention. The steady accumulation of evidence clicking together like puzzle pieces forming a prison sentence. Community support was growing stronger daily. Mrs. Aria found courage to speak publicly about harassment, inspiring 3 other elderly residents to share their stories. Young mechanic with the classic car came forward. Vietnam veteran growing therapy vegetables added his testimony. Pattern was undeniable. Systematic targeting of vulnerable residents for financial exploitation disguised as community improvement. But Vivian's desperation was reaching psychotic levels. She organized an emergency HOA meeting demanding county hire private security because local law enforcement is compromised. Translation, she wanted her own militia to intimidate opposition. The sharp smell of fear mixed with expensive perfume as Meadowbrook residents started questioning their dictator's sanity. Meeting turned into full rebellion. Homeowners demanded accounting for missing funds, questioned harassment campaign legality, and started discussing complete board replacement. Vivian's response? Doubled down on insanity, restraining order requests against me for stalking and threatening. When courts laughed that out, she petitioned county to declare my property a public nuisance requiring immediate seizure. Meanwhile, Burke escalated his intimidation campaign. Grocery store parking lots, courthouse steps, even outside Marlene's diner during our planning sessions. Professional stalking designed to make me feel hunted in my own county. The reassuring weight of my service weapon reminding me that some situations require direct action. Here's what made me smile. FBI agent Patterson revealed they'd been building a federal case against property fraud networks for 2 years. Vivian's operation was the missing link connecting crimes across multiple jurisdictions. Sheriff, Patterson explained during our private meeting, your harassment case could be the keystone that brings down an entire criminal enterprise. We're talking RICO charges, asset forfeiture, serious federal prison time. Translation? Vivian thought she was fighting a local property dispute when she'd actually declared war on federal law enforcement. The beautiful sound of justice machinery grinding into motion as our trap reached completion. County Commissioners' meeting was 3 days away. Vivian believed she was walking into her victory celebration where she'd publicly humiliate me and force my resignation. Instead, she was about to star in the most spectacular arrest video Texas had seen since they busted that oil executive embezzlement ring. Sometimes the best revenge is just letting criminals destroy themselves. 3 days before the commissioners' meeting, Vivian decided to go nuclear with a move so spectacularly stupid it belonged in a criminal justice textbook. She called a press conference. Not just our local paper, mind you. This woman convinced Channel 7 News from Dallas to drive 2 hours for what she pitched as David versus Goliath, community leader fights corrupt sheriff. The acrid smell of TV van exhaust mixed with my morning coffee as I watched the media circus set up outside the courthouse. Vivian arrived, dressed like she was auditioning for sainthood. White dress, pearl necklace, enough makeup to stock a department store. The whole production screamed, innocent victim, louder than a fire alarm. Ladies and gentlemen of the press, she began, voice trembling with practiced emotion. I'm just a concerned citizen trying to protect our community from a sheriff who believes his badge places him above the law. She dabbed at non-existent tears while cameras rolled, spinning a tale of harassment and intimidation that would have won Oscar nominations for creative fiction. Mini twist. What made my day was the phone call I'd gotten an hour earlier. Burke, Vivian's hired muscle, had been arrested for drunk driving the night before, and immediately started cooperating to save his skin from both legal prosecution and the loan sharks he owed money to. The sweet taste of irony as her own enforcer became our star witness. Burke had spilled everything, threats against property owners, coordination with harassment campaigns, even details about similar security services he'd provided for Vivian's operations in other states. Federal prosecutors were practically throwing immunity deals at him for cooperation, but Vivian was too busy performing for cameras to realize her world was collapsing. The press conference imploded when Channel 7's investigative reporter, a sharp-eyed woman named Rodriguez, started asking questions Vivian hadn't prepared for. Mrs. Thornberry Wells, how do you explain your HOA spending $47,000 on legal fees while claiming budget constraints for community improvements? Vivian's camera-ready smile flickered like a dying neon sign. Those are administrative matters handled through proper board channels. And what about reports that properties near your development have been purchased significantly below market value after intensive HOA enforcement campaigns? The beautiful sound of lies crumbling under professional journalism. Instead of gracefully ending the interview, Vivian committed career suicide by doubling down with conspiracy theories that would embarrass flat earthers. This sheriff has been stalking me for months, using taxpayer resources to intimidate law-abiding citizens. The corruption probably extends throughout the entire county government. Rodriguez's eyebrows shot up like she'd struck journalistic gold. Those are serious allegations. What evidence supports these claims? I have documentation of everything: surveillance footage, phone records, witness testimony. What she actually had was a fantasy novel written by Burke, who was currently singing federal songs to avoid decades in prison. The metallic taste of watching someone self-destruct on live television made my day complete. While Vivian performed her public meltdown, my team's silent preparation reached its final phase. Sarah had traced financial networks spanning 5 states, revealing over $3 million in fraudulent property transactions. Shell companies, family trusts, offshore accounts. The operation was more sophisticated than most international drug cartels. Martinez compiled digital evidence showing coordination between HOA boards across multiple states, shared harassment strategies, and actual training manuals for targeting vulnerable residents. These criminals had literally written textbooks for property theft. The steady accumulation of bulletproof evidence building toward inevitable justice. Agent Patterson's federal investigation was ready to execute. Simultaneous raids planned across Nevada, Oregon, Arizona, Colorado, and Texas. When they arrested Vivian tomorrow, they'd be dismantling an entire criminal network. Sheriff, Patterson explained during our final briefing, this is going to be the largest property fraud takedown in Bureau history. Your harassment complaint opened the door to prosecuting millions in interstate crimes. Community support exploded after the press conference disaster. Mrs. Aria organized a Support Our Sheriff rally that drew over 400 people. Local businesses donated food, the VFW provided security, and even Meadowbrook residents showed up to apologize for their association president's insanity. The warm embrace of genuine community solidarity washing away months of frustration. Vivian's response to overwhelming public support against her? Emergency motions claiming I was inciting mob violence and demanding private security protection from vigilante justice. Restraining orders multiplied like locusts. Against me, Sarah, Gus, Marlene, even Mrs. Aria for harassment conspiracy. Woman was throwing legal desperation at every available target. The pathetic sound of a cornered criminal running out of tricks and options. Her own family started abandoning ship. Dr. Thornberry filed for divorce, froze joint accounts, and provided federal agents complete access to financial records he'd been secretly maintaining. I documented everything, he told investigators. Kept records of every property scheme, every harassment campaign, every illegal payment. I knew this day would come. Even her brother-in-law, the mortgage company owner, flipped when federal agents threatened RICO charges carrying potential life sentences. Criminal loyalty evaporates quickly under federal pressure. The satisfying sight of conspiracy members turning on each other like hungry wolves. Burke's final revelation sealed Vivian's fate. She'd been collecting blackmail material on local officials, planning to threaten exposure if legal pressure intensified. Federal agents raided her storage unit, finding evidence of bribery attempts, illegal surveillance, and conspiracy to commit extortion. What began as property harassment had evolved into organized crime involving public corruption and interstate fraud. The weight of complete vindication settling over everything we'd endured. Tomorrow's commissioners' meeting wouldn't be about camping rights or HOA authority. It would be the public unveiling of the biggest criminal takedown in county history. Vivian Thornberry Wells thought she was walking into her greatest triumph. Instead, she was about to discover what Texas justice looks like when you mess with the wrong sheriff's family land. The courthouse main hearing room was packed tighter than a Texas honky-tonk on Saturday night. 300 people crammed into a space designed for half that many, with another 100 standing outside listening through open windows. Commissioner Hendricks had moved the meeting to the largest room available, but even that wasn't enough for the crowd this showdown had attracted. The electric tension of anticipation crackling through air thick with nervous energy and cheap cologne. Vivian sat at the front table with her expensive lawyer, looking like she'd dressed for a funeral, which, considering what was about to happen, was probably appropriate. She wore a black power suit and that practiced victim expression she'd perfected for cameras. I sat across from her in full uniform, badge polished to mirror brightness, with Sarah and my evidence binders arranged like artillery pieces. Behind me, the community had turned out in force. Mrs. Aria in the front row, Gus and Marlene flanking her like bodyguards, retired Sheriff Kowalski nodding approval from the back. Media cameras rolled from 3 different angles. Channel 7's Rodriguez looked like a shark smelling blood, while the local newspaper photographer couldn't stop clicking pictures. Commissioner Hendricks called for order, his gavel echoing through the packed room. We're here to address citizen complaints regarding Sheriff Calloway's conduct in property-related matters. Vivian's lawyer stood first, presenting their evidence with theatrical flourish. Photos allegedly showing my abuse of authority, documented complaints about harassment, witness statements from her HOA committee. Commissioner Hendricks, the lawyer proclaimed, no one should be above accountability, especially sworn law enforcement officers who abuse their positions for personal gain. Vivian took the microphone next, launching into her practiced victim performance. I've tried to work within the system, but this sheriff has used his badge to intimidate and harass law-abiding citizens who simply want to maintain community standards. The familiar taste of lies hanging heavy in the courtroom air. Her voice rose with false emotion. If we allow this behavior to continue, what message does that send? That badges matter more than justice, that power corrupts even those sworn to protect us. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, some supportive, others skeptical. Vivian's performance was polished. I had to give her that. Commissioner Hendricks turned to me. Sheriff Calloway, how do you respond to these allegations? I stood slowly, approaching the microphone with my thick evidence binder. The room fell silent except for camera shutters clicking like mechanical crickets. Commissioner Hendricks, I'd like to address these charges directly, I began, my voice carrying clearly through the packed room. But first, I think this community deserves to know the whole truth about what we're really dealing with here. Vivian's confident smile faltered slightly. I opened my binder and pulled out the financial documents Sarah had compiled. Mrs. Thornberry Wells claims this is about community standards and law enforcement accountability. The evidence tells a different story. The satisfying rustle of damning documentation as I spread charts and bank records across the table. Over the past 5 years, Mrs. Thornberry Wells has operated systematic property fraud schemes in California, Arizona, Nevada, Oregon, and now Texas. Her method is simple but effective. Take control of HOA boards, harass vulnerable property owners with frivolous violations, then purchase their properties at below-market prices through shell companies. Vivian's lawyer tried to object, but Commissioner Hendricks waved him silent. Let the sheriff finish. I pulled out more evidence. In Texas alone, she's stolen $63,000 from HOA members to fund harassment campaigns. She's used community dues to pay for private investigators, hired muscle, and legal fees designed to intimidate elderly residents into selling their homes. The sound of shocked gasps from Meadowbrook residents who'd been unknowingly funding their own victimization. But here's where it gets interesting, I continued, pulling out Burke's confession. She hired ex-police officer Burke to threaten property owners who wouldn't cooperate. Yesterday, Mr. Burke was arrested and chose to cooperate with federal investigators rather than face decades in prison for conspiracy charges. Vivian shot to her feet. This is a fabrication. Character assassination. That's when FBI agent Patterson stood up from the back of the room. Mrs. Vivian Thornberry Wells, his voice cut through the chaos like a sword. You're under arrest for mail fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy to commit racketeering, theft of community funds, and criminal threats against a law enforcement officer. The dead silence of justice finally arriving fell over the courtroom like a heavy blanket. Federal agents moved in from both sides, handcuffs ready. Vivian's lawyer immediately distanced himself, gathering his papers like the courtroom was on fire. You have the right to remain silent, Agent Patterson continued as handcuffs clicked around Vivian's wrists. I strongly suggest you use it. But Vivian couldn't resist one final performance. This is a setup, corruption. You can't do this to me. Commissioner Hendricks banged his gavel. "Ma'am, you're in federal custody. This hearing is concluded." As agents led her away, Burke was brought in already handcuffed, pointing at Vivian for the cameras. "She paid me to threaten him and half a dozen other property owners. Got it all on tape if you want proof." The beautiful sight of criminal conspiracies collapsing under the weight of their own greed. Rodriguez stepped forward with her microphone. "Sheriff Calloway, how does it feel to be vindicated?" "This was never about me," I replied, looking out at the crowd of supporters. "This was about protecting our community from predators who use authority to steal from vulnerable people. Today, justice won." Commissioner Hendricks formally apologized on behalf of the county and asked how we could prevent similar schemes in the future. I suggested stronger oversight of HOA formations, mandatory financial audits, and better protections for elderly property owners. The taste of sweet victory mixed with relief and genuine community pride. The state attorney general's representative announced they were forming a task force to investigate predatory HOA practices statewide. My case would be used as a training example for law enforcement agencies across Texas. As the crowd filed out, Mrs. Aria approached with tears in her eyes. "Sheriff, thank you for standing up for all of us. I was so scared, but watching you fight gave me courage. That made everything worthwhile." Outside, as TV crews packed their equipment, I noticed Vivian's foreclosed house was already being converted into a community center. The irony was perfect, her criminal headquarters becoming a place for neighbors to gather and support each other. The warm satisfaction of justice served and community healing already beginning. Sometimes the best victory isn't just defeating the bad guys, it's showing everyone else that standing up to bullies actually works. 6 months later, I'm sitting by that same lake where this nightmare started, watching the sunset paint water so clear you can count pebbles 15 feet down. Vivian Thornberry Wells pleaded guilty to 8 federal counts and received 5 years in federal prison, plus $127,000 in restitution to victims. Her criminal network collapsed across 5 states, with 12 arrests and millions in stolen property returned to families who'd lost hope of ever seeing justice. Dr. Thornberry donated $50,000 to a victims fund before relocating to Arizona for a fresh start. Burke served 18 months and became a federal witness, helping convict property fraudsters nationwide. The peaceful sound of water lapping against shores where I'd once been handcuffed for camping on my own land. But the real victory was watching our community heal and grow stronger. Our first Unity BBQ drew 500 people from across the county. Mrs. Aria cut the ribbon on a new community fishing pier funded by local businesses supporting elderly residents Vivian had targeted. Families brought kids to swim, veterans found peace fishing, and neighbors who'd been strangers discovered shared values. The joyful sound of children's laughter mixing with barbecue smoke as my grandfather's land became a sanctuary for everyone. Sarah and I rebuilt our friendship on firmer ground than our marriage ever had. She launched a legal clinic specializing in HOA abuse cases, using our experience to help victims nationwide fight predatory boards. "Rex," she said during the BBQ, "we've received inquiries from 12 states about similar fraud cases. You didn't just win a local fight, you started a movement." Legal reforms followed quickly once politicians realized how many voters had HOA horror stories. Our county implemented mandatory oversight for new developments, required annual financial audits, and created automatic state reviews for harassment complaints. The deep satisfaction of permanent change protecting future families from Vivian's brand of exploitation. Property values in Meadowbrook stabilized as residents learned they could govern themselves without tyranny. 5 families who'd planned to flee under pressure chose to stay and rebuild their community spirit. Vivian's foreclosed mansion became affordable housing for elderly residents, while other seized properties were converted into a community center offering legal aid, financial counseling, and property rights education. I started the Sheriff's Youth Fishing Program for at-risk kids, teaching patience, respect for nature, and honest work values. Watching 12-year-olds land their first base while learning life lessons reminded me why this land matters to future generations. The warmth of purposeful legacy work flowing through programs honoring my grandfather's memory. The FBI made our case a national training example. Agent Patterson visits twice yearly to update prevention programs and share intelligence about emerging fraud schemes. "Sheriff," he explained during his last visit, "your fight probably saved hundreds of families from similar exploitation. These predators depend on victims being too intimidated or isolated to resist. Documentary filmmakers purchased our story rights with proceeds funding the Texas Rural Property Rights Legal Clinic. 3 states adopted our protective model for vulnerable homeowners facing HOA abuse. Governor Abbott declared October's second Saturday Property Rights Awareness Day. encouraging communities to educate residents about legal protections and recognize predatory warning signs. The enduring satisfaction of justice extending far beyond personal vindication. My weekend camping continues, but now friends, neighbors, and youth program kids often join me. Trail cameras capture wildlife footage for a nature blog that's surprisingly popular with city folks dreaming of rural peace. Retired Sheriff Kowalski visits regularly, sharing wisdom with anyone willing to listen. "Rex," he observed last time, "your grandfather would be proud. You protected not just land, but community itself." Mrs. Aria teaches neighborhood children to fish every Saturday morning, passing down patience and traditional values to a screen-obsessed generation. Watching her guide small hands casting lines proves healing works both ways. The sweet comfort of community bonds stronger than any challenge we might face. Annual Camp Out for Community fundraisers support scholarships for local students pursuing law enforcement or legal careers. Last year's event raised $15,000, with camping families from 6 counties joining us under infinite Texas stars. Gus's hardware store displays our Heroes of Property Rights photo gallery, celebrating neighbors who protected vulnerable residents. Vivian's mugshot serves as a warning to future would-be dictators. My favorite change is simplest. Every sunset brings families walking trails around my lake, kids skipping stones while parents discuss community issues like neighbors should. The eternal whisper of Texas wind through oak trees that have witnessed generations of struggles and triumphs. Other sheriffs facing similar situations call for advice. My response is always identical. Document everything, know your rights, remember that united communities defeat individual bullies every time. Here are the key lessons that could protect your family. Know your property rights before HOA disputes escalate. Document harassment with dates, photos, and witnesses. Research HOA finances. They're often public records. File complaints with state agencies for pattern harassment. Community support beats individual resistance every time. Next week, I'm speaking at Austin Property Rights seminars about recognizing predatory schemes and legal tools for fighting back. Knowledge shared is power multiplied. As I finish this story, Martinez texts, "Sheriff, interesting case in the next county. City council member, suspicious zoning changes. Sound familiar?" The familiar call of justice beckoning once again. But that's another story. For now, I'm watching sunset over my grandfather's lake, knowing that sometimes defending your ground means protecting everyone's ground. Share your worst HOA nightmare in the comments. Let's support each other and share winning strategies that actually work against these bullies. Hit subscribe for more David versus Goliath justice stories here on HOA Stories, and ring that notification bell so you never miss the good guys winning for the community.
That's a wrap for today's episode on HOA Stories. If you enjoyed watching Karma in action, smash that like button, comment your thoughts, and let us know if you've dealt with HOA madness too. Subscribe so you won't miss the next HOA meltdown we post.